The reflection in the old mirror. The gravel crunched under Claire Hensley's tires as her old Toyota shuddered to a stop outside her grandmother's farmhouse in Dunwich Hollow, Vermont. It was March 16, 2005, and the late afternoon sky hung heavy with clouds, casting a dull gray pall over the rolling hills. The air was damp, thick with the scent of pine and earth, a sharp contrast to the exhaust fumes of Boston, where Claire usually chased her stories. At 26, she was a freelance journalist with a hunger for the overlooked small towns, forgotten people, the kind of tales that didn't make headlines but lingered in the mind. This time, she'd come to write about rural life, using her grandmother Ruth's isolated home as her base. It had been years since she last visited, decades, really, since those hazy childhood summers, but Ruth's letters, full of cryptic proverbs and pressed flowers, had kept her tethered to this place. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its sagging roof and peeling paint a testament to neglect. A thin wisp of smoke curled from the chimney, and the window's small, warped panes seemed to squint against the fading light. Claire grabbed her duffel bag and laptop from the back seat, her boots sinking into the muddy path as she approached the porch. The wind carried a low moan through the bare trees, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. She knocked once, twice, but the door creaked open on its own, revealing Ruth Hensley framed in the threshold. "Claire," Ruth said, her voice raspy, like wind over dry leaves. She was smaller than Claire remembered, her frame stooped, her white hair pulled into a tight bun. Her pale blue eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, fixed on Claire with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. Ruth wore a faded cardigan over a long dress, her hands gnarled and trembling slightly. "You made it." "Hey, Gran," Claire said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you too. Thanks for letting me stay. I just need a few days for my article." Ruth stepped aside, her gaze flickering to the darkening sky. "Come in then. Watch the floor, it's uneven in spots." She hesitated, her lips tightening. "You shouldn't come now though. March 17th ain't a day for visitors round here." Claire frowned, brushing it off as old lady quirks. "I'll manage. Deadlines don't care about calendars." She stepped inside, the air warm and heavy with wood smoke and a faint floral tang, lavender maybe. The living room was dim, lit by a single lamp with a stained shade. A worn sofa sagged against one wall, a rocking chair creaked by the hearth, and above the mantel hung a mirror, tall, oval, its wooden frame carved with twisting vines. Dust coated its surface, dulling the glass, and a thin crack split one corner. It looked ancient, out of place in the modest room, like a relic from another time. "I remember that," Claire said, nodding at the mirror as she dropped her bag. "It was here when I was a kid. You ever clean it?" Ruth's hands stilled, clutching the edge of the door. 40 years it's been there," she said, her voice low, almost a growl. 40 years untouched. "Leave it alone, Claire." Claire raised an eyebrow but let it slide. She wasn't here to pick fights over decor. She spent the afternoon settling and unpacking in a cramped upstairs bedroom with a slop ceiling, setting up her laptop on a rickety desk, snapping photos of the house for her piece. Ruth stayed downstairs, the clatter of pots echoing from the kitchen as she prepared supper. Dinner was tense venison stew, thick and gamey, served in chip bowls. Ruth barely spoke, her eyes darting to the windows, tracking the shadows lengthening outside. Claire tried to coax out some local color for her article, but Ruth's responses were curt. "Folks here mind their own," Ruth said, stirring her spoon. "Always have. You should too." Night fell fast, the house shrinking under a blanket of darkness. Claire typed notes by the fire, the crackle of logs a steady rhythm, while Ruth sat in her rocking chair, knitting needles clicking like a metronome. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and Claire felt a prickle of unease she couldn't shake. Ruth's cryptic warning about March 17th tomorrow itched at her thoughts. She glanced at the mirror again, its dusty surface catching the Firelight and odd, muted flashes. Gran, she said, keeping her tone casual. What's with tomorrow? You've got me wondering. Ruth's needles froze mid-stitch. She looked up, her face half shadowed, the fire casting deep lines across her cheeks. Some things ain't for you to poke at, she said. You should have stayed away, Claire. Come in here on this day. She trailed off, her jaw tightening, then stood abruptly. I'm going to bed. J-night? Claire watched her climb the stairs, each step groaning under her weight. Alone now, she studied the mirror, its presence heavier somehow, like it was pressing against the room. She shook her head exhaustion, nothing more, and headed to bed. The wind howling outside her window like a distant cry. She jolted awake hours later, heart pounding, to a sound soft, rhythmic, a murmur threading through the silence. It wasn't the wind. She checked her phone. 2:47 a.m., March 17th. Slipping out of bed, she crept to the door, socks muffling her steps, and listened. The sound sharpened Ruth's voice, low and urgent, drifting from downstairs. It wasn't a conversation to steady, too strange, like a chant. Claire grabbed her phone and eased down the stairs, avoiding the creaky third step she'd noted earlier. The living room was dark, the fire a faint glow of embers, but a sickly light pulsed from the mirror, dim, greenish, emanating from within the glass. Ruth stood before it, her back to Claire, her nightgown hanging loose on her frail body. Her arms were raised, fingers trembling, and she spoke words Claire didn't recognize, harsh and guttural, like a language carved from stone. I've kept my vow, Ruth whispered, her voice breaking. 40 years, as I swore. I've served. Given you all I had. Take me now. Let it be done. The mirror flared once, twice the light swelling, and Claire's skin crawled as the air thickened, pressing against her chest. She ducked behind the sofa, her breath shallow, and switched her phone to camera mode. Zooming in, she snapped. Silent shots, Ruth's silhouette, the mirror's glow, the dust swirling on its surface into faint, twisting shapes, lines, curves, almost a face. Please, Ruth said, louder now, a sob in her throat. It's time. I'm ready. The light pulsed again, and Claire's hands shook as she took another photo. Ruth turned slightly, not enough to see Claire, but enough to reveal her face, eyes wide, pupils swallowing the blue, tears glistening on her wrinkled skin. Claire's mind spun. A vow? 40 years? This wasn't just rural folklore, this was real, dark, and deep. She'd stumbled into something massive, a story that could define her career. But more than that, she saw her grandmother, old, broken, afraid, and felt a fierce need to protect her. Whatever this was, Ruth was its prisoner. Claire slipped back upstairs, her pulse racing, and sat on her bed, scrolling through the photos. The last one chilled her. The mirror's dust had settled into a clear shape of face, not Ruth's, but sharp, hollow, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen, locking onto hers. Morning came gray and cold. Ruth shuffled around the kitchen, her face pale and drawn, serving oatmeal in silence. Claire watched her, searching for traces of the night's terror, but Ruth avoided her eyes. Sleep well? Ruth asked, her voice flat. Fine, Claire lied. You? Ruth shrugged, stirring her coffee with a trembling hand. Claire waited until she went outside to feed the chickens, then dove into her laptop. She pulled up old articles. Dunwich Hollow had a shadowy past. Vanishings in the 80s, whispers of a cult in the 60s, strange rites tied to the land. Nothing solid, but patterns emerged. Ruth was born here in 1945, widowed in 83, alone since. 40 years ago was 1985, the year the mirror appeared. Claire's stomach knotted. Ruth had joined a cult, made a pact with whatever lived in that glass, and last night was the reckoning. She couldn't let it take her grandmother. Journalist or not, this was family. She waited until evening, when Ruth stepped out to the barn, then crept downstairs. The mirror loomed over the mantel, its glow stronger now, even in the fading daylight, a sickly shimmer that made her head throb. She ran her fingers along its frame, cold, slick, like ice over stone, and felt a hum, deep and resonant, vibrating in her chest. She had to break it. She remembered the shed tools and axe. Grabbing her coat, she dashed outside, the wind biting her face, and rummaged through the cluttered shed until she found it, a rusted axe, its handle worn but sturdy. Back inside, she faced the mirror. Her reflection warped her eyes to large, too dark, her mouth a thin, unfamiliar line. "Claire," Ruth's voice cracked from the doorway, raw with panic. "What are you doing?" Claire spun, axe raised. "I saw you last night, Gran. I heard you saw the mirror. You're caught in something awful, and I'm getting you out." Ruth's face crumpled, tears welling. "You don't know what you're meddling with, girl. I chose this back in '85. I joined them, the cult. They promised me things, safety, strength, and I gave my life to it. Tonight's my debt. Come and do. You can't stop it." "I can," Claire said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I won't let it take you." She swung the axe hard, the blade smashing into the glass. It shattered, a deafening scream erupting as shards flew outward, slicing the air. The glow flared, blinding, then collapsed into darkness. Claire dropped the axe, gasping, glass crunching under her boots. Ruth stumbled back, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's gone," Ruth whispered, sinking into the rocking chair. "You broke it." Claire knelt beside her, brushing glass from her hair. "You're free, Gran. It's over." Ruth nodded, tears streaming, but her gaze shifted. Fear crept in, her eyes locking on Claire's. "No," she said, barely audible. "It ain't." That night, Claire's sleep was fractured, dreams of shadows, whispers curling around her like smoke. She woke to silence, no wind, no creaks, just her own uneven breaths. She felt heavy, wrong. Stumbling to the bathroom, she splashed water on her face and froze. In the small mirror above the sink, her reflection moved, tilted its head, smiled faintly when she stood still. She blinked, and it was gone. Just her own tired face staring back. She shook it off, chalking it up to stress, and packed her things. By noon, she was gone, driving south, the farmhouse shrinking in her rearview mirror. Ruth stayed behind, watching from the porch, her hands clasped tight. She'd seen it, the flicker in Claire's eyes, the way her shadow stretched along. In the morning light, the faint hum in her voice when she said goodbye. The mirror was broken, the pact severed, but the thing it held hadn't died, it had moved into Claire. Ruth knew the signs, she'd lived with it for 40 years. It was patient, waiting, biding its time. Claire didn't know, couldn't feel it yet, but Ruth did. And as the Toyota vanished down the road, Ruth whispered to the empty air, "God help her when it wakes." Weeks later, Claire settled back into her Boston apartment, the article half written, the photos from that night tucked away on her phone. She felt off, tired, distracted, her dreams filled with that same hollow face from the mirror. One night, editing her draft, she caught her reflection in the laptop screen. It smiled when she didn't, its eyes glinting with something ancient, hungry. She blinked, and it was gone. But deep inside, something stirred, waiting.